Welcome to the Magic of Positive Thinking, a podcast hosted by Norb Svanascini, founder of AmericanEagle.com, and writer Al Edwards. Norb, happy spring. The wonderful weather just feels good, doesn't it?
As you know, I thank God every day for this gift and this present he gives us. But I think today the present is much bigger than usual, and it's just a phenomenal day. And really, we should all be thankful for this.
There's no question. And friends, most of you know that we do our podcast in Des Plaines, Illinois, which is a suburb of Chicago. And winters, even though the winter has been pretty mild this past year, winter is just difficult. And you don't realize it until spring is here. It's just, life is easier when the weather's nicer, don't you think?
I like the four seasons. I actually enjoy snow. We talked about this before, but there is a beautiful, beautiful time of the year when you see that entrance of spring and everything's blooming, flowers and spring. And it actually shows you, there's always hope, that tree will come up and those flowers will come up, and it doesn't matter what they do in Moscow or Washington, D.C. or Turkey. I mean, it doesn't matter.
Right.
This will win.
Spring is really about hope and renewal, and it's really inspiring, and it kind of goes right into the theme of our show that we've been doing for 2.5 years now.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hope and renewal. Well, friends, we thought we talked about this at a very, very, early podcast, but we thought we would do a show on it, and it's springtime. And what do most people think about in the springtime? They think about dandelions. And we thought about a great idea for a show, 5 great life lessons from the dandelion. And one of the things that we talked about last time is that everyone hates dandelions here in the United States, but they're actually very nutritious, and people make salads out of them in Japan and everything, don't they?
In Japan and Italy and Greece. Yeah, I think the Mediterranean countries in general, they actually look forward to having dandelion salads. And science has proven that a dandelion is a very healthy thing to eat, and the problem is, we've talked about this before, we in modern society tend to ignore things that are not costly and are very abundant. So,
right.
This is one of the problems. You can pick dandelions. They don't cost anything. So.
Right. And once again, friends, I'd like to announce that Norb and I will be picking everyone's dandelions this spring and selling it to all the Japanese farmers.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So if you see us in your yard one Saturday, don't call the police. It's just us doing our due duty that we need to do for the world. So, well, let's talk about that. But before we do, Norb, you got a couple things you wanted to talk about.
Well, one of the things that came up after we did the last show, which is kind of interesting, and I did some looking up in it, and it's kind of interesting that even the Greek philosophers warned about what I'm going to talk about, which is kind of interesting because I never realized that it was so permeated into our society. And everybody has heard this term, but I don't think that people really understand how deep it goes into the psyche of people. And the subject is misery loves company.
Mm.
And, this is probably one of the greatest tragedies in the world today. And, Al and I always talk about how the media is so incredibly negative, and more people that I know actually are not even listening to news, and they're proud of it. I have friends that say, I just don't pay any attention to news anymore. I just don't care.
I don't watch the news.
Because they're all negative. No,
never.
And I do. But, it's kind of interesting because reading all this stuff, you pick up statements that very famous people did or said. And I have one, from the was considered the founder of the United States, which is George Washington. And this is a quote: "It is far better to be alone than to be in bad company.
Wow.
Now just think of that. To be in bad company is bad for you. Because unluckily today, there is a huge percentage of miserable people. They're miserable. They worry about everything. They worry about things they can't control. And this is one of the great, great things about learning how to be positive is to basically identify, just be really, really tough on yourself and say, is this something I really should worry about? There's a great, great website about all of the predictions that have been made about the catastrophe that the world is going to encounter with climate change. This goes back over 100 years. People have been predicting the end of the world by flooding of New York City from the 1900s, the early 1900s. New York City's still there, and how hurricanes are worse than ever, and this and this. And first of all, just think about how ignorant you have to be. Ignorant is the word. When you can take a short lifetime, which is basically 80 years old roughly, and you make decisions about something that has existed for millions of years. This is insulting to anybody's intelligent that even thinks a little bit. What do they know? They don't know anything. But they're making all these predictions because, they're getting paid for them and because negativism is very profitable. There is no money in being positive, okay? And the other thing, Oscar Wilde had a really, really good quote that I want to share with you. And basically, to be positive is being able to live happily. And this is Oscar Wilde's quote. He says, "To live is the rarest thing in the world. Most people exist. That's all."
Wow.
And if you get that, if you just want to exist, worry about everything. Because you'll have a lot of people that'll love you because misery loves company. And, it's miserable people are very attracted to other miserable people. They gather together and they form, media companies and they form newspaper articles and they're all, they love each other because they're all ready to go to hell in this miserable world,
in a handbasket.
And you know what? Let them. Remove yourself from those type of people, because if you realize that misery loves company, run away from them. Just run away from them.
I love that. I couldn't agree more. And it actually ties into our lessons from the Dandelion, because there's this collective hatred in this country every spring of dandelions. Everyone hates them. And what did the dandelion ever do to you, Norb? That's what I want to know.
The dandelion really is something that, upsets the view of this beautiful grass.
Right.
And you see this thing sticking out. And if you're positive, you just yank it out and make a salad out of it. And you know
exactly.
What? So what? There's an old saying, if you have a lemon, make a lemonade out of it.
That's right.
And if you see a dandelion, make a salad out of it. And it's good for you. That's the most incredible thing.
And that's the thing about misery loves company. It's like everyone just sits around together to be miserable, like it's a hobby.
Oh, absolutely. Here's an interesting quote. I said, whenever I'm faced with someone spreading negativity in my relationship, I remember the old saying, misery loves company. I'm also reminded to be mindful of the company you keep. Sometimes you cannot see a hater until you are happy. Just look at that.
Wow.
Think of that. Sometimes you cannot see a hater until you are happy. It is then that they demonstrate their negativity.
Wow.
That was by somebody called Raheem Devon. And this is another one that's a good one. There is no room for drama in our lives. The term has been overused and trivialized. However, the effects are very serious. Drama needlessly interrupts important matters. It's toxic. It destroys everything and everyone it touches. That kind of misery loves company, but you can always decline the invitation. That was a gentleman by the name of Carlos Wallace who said that. And it's really nice thing. See, people in misery don't want you to heal them. They want you to be sick with them.
Right.
Walk away from these people who are always angry and continuously looking for conflict. They are fighting their own battles, not yours.
I love that. And it couldn't be more simple and more true. And yet so many of us fall into that. You know, there was a great psychologist and philosopher. He's passed away now, unfortunately. His name was Wayne Dyer, and he was a real classic. And he used to talk about drama and stress and worry and everything. And he said it's all made up in our minds. There's no stress in the universe. There's no drama in the universe. It's perfect. It just goes on and does what it is. There's no stress. It's all man-made.
And we've said this before. It's an insult to whoever created this to think that we can alter it. We're nothing. We should enjoy what has been given to us for free.
Right.
You know, just think of this. You take a little seed of a tomato and you put it in the ground and it gives you more tomatoes. Now, I'm sure that, you know, if people in universities with high degrees couldn't duplicate this.
Right.
The smartest people in the world couldn't duplicate this.
Couldn't create a seed.
Yeah, they couldn't create a seed. And you know, we have them for free, and it gives us tomatoes. And, you know, bees fly all over, and the scientists don't even know how the heck a bee flies. And you know, they give honey, and honey is something that lasts forever. They found in Greek ships 2,000-year-old honey containers.
Right.
Honey's still good. And we have no idea how to do this kind of stuff. And we get together in universities and governments and say, well, we have to do this and we have to do this to do this. Leave it alone. Enjoy the fruits of what has been given to us.
Right.
You know, and to think that we can alter that is an insult to anybody's with any kind of intelligence whatsoever. Ridiculous.
We're just a pimple on the rear end of the earth, basically, right?
Yeah. Probably less than that. Yeah.
Even less than a pimple.
Yeah,
I don't know what you would call that, but it's less than a pimple.
Yeah.
Well, as usual, you do a wonderful job into segueing a lot of the things we want to talk about. You know, living instead of existing. And we want to talk about the beloved dandelion. By the way, you were mentioning that dandelions are hated because you look out on this green lawn and you see all these yellow flowers. They're actually very pretty. They're not like scary faces on them or giving you an obscene gesture.
No, it just upsets the idealism that, you know, we all have. I like to have a nice lawn. Don't get me wrong. And when I see a dandelion, I don't make a salad out of it. Maybe I should, but
we should.
You know, it just destroys that.
Right. The symmetry.
Yeah. And I understand that, but you also have to look at that. It is a incredibly beautiful flower by itself.
Yeah.
And the field of dandelions is actually very pretty.
Very much so.
And you know, for some reason or other, and I'm not objecting this, we've decided that, you know, grass looks better than a dandelion field.
Right.
And that's okay, you know, nothing wrong. But we shouldn't be upset about this gift of nature.
Well, that's the thing. And the funny thing is that it causes upset. And that's really the first point that we want to make today about the dandelion. The dandelion doesn't care one iota what you think of it. It's just going to grow and do its thing and sprout up It doesn't care 1 second what everyone thinks about it. It's still just going to do what it does and be itself. And that is a great lesson for life, I think.
Oh, yeah. And, the way nature has designed it, which is something that, this is thinking positively, just what a wonderful thing this is. There's a little bee that flies into the dandelion flower and it pollinates it. And then, that bee goes back to the hive, creates honey. And then, other bees go back and pollinate other flowers. And there's more dandelions. And like Al says, it doesn't hurt anything. It's just a beautiful, if you just observe and respect what nature does without any human input.
Right.
God forbid if women started screwing around with that, there'd be no dandelions and no bees, but it's just incredibly beautiful to actually look at that,
Absolutely. No question. The other thing that I thought was really interesting is that every spring, we as Americans spend literally millions and millions of dollars to get rid of dandelions. And I think about this, Norb, if there was a group of people or an entire industry that spent millions and millions of dollars to make sure that Norb Svanascini did not succeed, and yet the dandelion just comes back every year, despite thousands and thousands of tons of chemicals and millions of dollars sold of products, the dandelion just comes back. And if that isn't a lesson in perseverance, I don't know what is.
It's not only a lesson of perseverance, but it's a lesson of the design of this. This is a positive action from the creator of dandelions and everything else that it will not allow the humans to alter its design. It's ridiculous. I mean, it's just it's ridiculous. But getting back to this thing about misery loves company, which again, taking it to the dandelion, or people do criticize the dandelion. It's, oh my God, I'm miserable. I got dandelions, and everybody, oh yeah, this dandelion. I don't know how to get rid of them. Well, let's eat them.
Right.
I mean, it's if you had a bunch of cows running in your backyard, of course that'd be awful. But you could, kill them and eat them, and you'd be healthier eating a little meat.
We should start a business renting cows in the springtime. You just stand in your yard and just eat dandelions. The other thing, in an earlier podcast, this was quite a while ago, Norb, you told the story of a business you owned that had quite a filthy alley behind it. And there was a beautiful plant that just sprung out of nowhere in this filthy environment. And the dandelion does the same thing. The dandelion, who has not walked down the street and seen a crack on the sidewalk with some dirt in it? All of a sudden, this lovely dandelion pops out of it.
Well, it's kind of interesting because, in Italy during World War II, there were parts of Italy that were totally decimated. And I have a very good friend of mine who remembers that people would actually extract flowers, or most of them I would imagine were dandelions, from the cracks of concrete streets and whatever was bombed out, and they would eat the plants that were within those cracks.
Wow.
And that was part of the survival. And, so look at that kind of stuff that we considered bad or ugly as a gift that is there for us. And we can kill it or we can use it positively,
Well, and that's the thing. And I think this whole kind of silly discussion about dandelions, although I do think there are some powerful life lessons there, that when we look at things, we assign good or bad to it in our own mind. So it's not the actual dandelion that has good or evil to it. It's got we put our perception of our mental attitude about it onto the thing. And that's a great kind of a wake-up call for us how to look at how we see life, I think.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I just read something which I want to share with you too. And this is something about a book that was dealing on success, and it's not only success monetarily, and but here's a great statement, and you have to realize this book was about tilted towards making money, but also just being a happy person. It says there's a great deal more to becoming rich than buying the right investments and hoping for the best. The most important element in your strategy to win the battle for investment survival is your own psychology. You've heard that attitude helps your health and your golf score. It also improves your earning power. Now, that's really interesting. Even people that talk about making money basically realize that the psychological state of your mind about being positive improves your earning power. And it's more important to liquidate counterproductive attitudes and the approaches you take and methods of dealing with problems. A sound philosophy of life gives good results. People with chaotic, unproductive, unhappy lives usually don't have anyone to blame but themselves.
Wow.
You know, there's plenty of good advice on the subject. Marcus Aurelius' Meditations. Now, this is Marcus Aurelius. This is over 2,000 years ago. Ben Franklin's autobiography. Norman Vincent Peale's Power of Positive Thinking. All these people preach the same line. You know, stay away from negative people and also think positively. One of the most important things about the Great Depression is that it will give you a chance to pull your philosophy of life to the test.
Wow.
Almost anyone can get by in good times. Anyone. Many will taste the thrill of victory or the agony of defeat firsthand, depending on how they approach any hardship in life. There's no such thing as plain bad luck. Damon Runyon said, the bread may not always go to the wise, nor to the swift, nor to the strong. But if you're betting, that's the way to bet.
Wow.
You know, always do that. That's one thing no one can ever take away from you. You can never lose it. Your attitude towards life.
It affects everything we do.
Everything we do. Everything.
Everything we do starts in our minds and how we perceive it.
You know, before the show started, Al and I and the gentleman here that runs this thing, we talk about different things. And we actually laugh for about 10, 15 minutes about all kinds of crazy things we've done in our lives. But we laugh about it. Even of our failures, we laugh. You know, basically, Al said something that he did in his life, which, you know, he wasn't happy about it. He had a lesson and he laughed about it. I did the same thing, you know, and it's just something about life that if you just take the things that have gone wrong, that we all have had them, and laugh about them and remember them as something you don't want to repeat because you learned a lesson from it.
Right.
It's again about something that we always talk about in this show. Thomas Edison failed 3,000 times before he made that light bulb.
That's right.
And I'm sure he talked more about the failures than, you know, the light bulb itself.
Exactly. And actually, you know, that story warrants telling very quickly because it really is a story more of about love and understanding and compassion than it is anything else. When I was about 21, I bought a car from Norb. And it was a Cadillac, believe it or not. It was called a Cimarron. I was feeling very fancy that I bought a Cadillac. A beautiful car, actually. I loved it. And of course, I had to buy it on time. I took credit from Norb, and I had to make payments, and I can't remember what it was. But the car, I think, was like $1,400 or something like that. And I was so excited. I ran out and I had it painted, and I put new tires on it. And I just forgot one little thing. And what I forgot was to pay Norb off for the car before I did all those things. So in my naivete and excitement, I ran over to Norb's house one day and I said, I'm like 21. And I said, Norb, look at the car. Look how I improved it and everything. There was a new paint job on it and a new fancy tires, raised white letter Firestones. And I felt very fancy. And he looked at me with a great amount of love and compassion. And he could have been angry and told me what a jerk I was. But with a great amount of love and compassion, he said, Al, you may want to pay for the car first before you do all those things. And not only was that a great lesson, but the love and understanding of just knowing I was a dumb kid really is the moral of that lesson. And Norb, I want to tell you, I'll never forget that you were loving and compassionate about this stupid kid that didn't pay for the car, and yet he took it over to show you the new paint job on it.
I've always been a guy that reads a lot, and one of the things I learned in life is that no human brain is totally developed till you're 25.
Right.
If you would have been 26 and done that, I would have gotten mad.
Yeah, exactly.
Because I knew you were 21 and your mind wasn't fully developed. So,
but I
forgive that.
Thank you. I was obviously still cognitively impaired, or I would not have done that.
Yeah.
So.
No, I watched something. I told Al that I wanted to talk about something before we ended this show. Sunday morning, CBS has a show, and they have little vignettes of little things, and there were two things that were kind of interesting. One of them was kind of interesting because it showed what positive thinking can do under some of the worst circumstances possible, and I grew up in an era where, the movie The Sound of Music, which is still very popular, by the way, was really one of the great movies ever made, inspirational, and probably had one of the most incredibly talented and beautiful and just nice people that you could ever imagine. And that was Julie Andrews. And this was Sunday. This was yesterday, actually. We're taping this on a Monday. And Julie Andrews is in her 90s now, but when she was, I guess it would have been in her 60s, she had an operation on her throat somehow that damaged the vocal cords, and she could never sing again. And I'm thinking to myself, here's a lady who was definitely a lady, well-known, made everybody happy in the world because you saw a Julie Andrews movies and it made you happy. You walked out of the theater happy. And, anybody who does that should be envied because most of especially today, you go to a movie basically to be miserable, but back then it was, and she sang beautiful songs and you actually could understand when she sang something. And
she was one of the most iconic, great voices ever.
Oh, yeah. I mean, she was very popular since she was 12 years old or 10. She sang for the Queen of England at that age because of her voice. And all of a sudden, they have a little operation, and she lost her voice. And I don't know how many of us could actually cope with being so famous and having this incredible gift of this gift that she had, and all of a sudden it was gone. I mean, she couldn't sing anymore. And obviously, when somebody wanted Julie Andrews and they paid a lot of money, they wanted her to sing.
Right.
So it was gone. And most people, I think, would probably, just dig a hole and stay there if not commit suicide. I mean, tragedy. Amazingly enough, Julie Andrews was fortunate to have a daughter, and they started another career, and they are basically making children's books. They have a successful business doing business books. And the thing that impressed me the most is that, the beating she took in her life was taken away from her. Anything that made her valuable or famous was gone. And instead of receding and beating herself to death, somehow she had a positive attitude of doing something else, doing something with her life. And I think it's just a wonderful, wonderful story of attitude. Just tremendous. I mean, I'm really happy.
Just real quick as we close the show, you're right. I said to you before the show, I wonder if I would have the fortitude to something like that so powerful in one's life, and you're literally world famous for it and an icon, to be taken away and to have that kind of character and strength to find meaning elsewhere is truly nothing short of extraordinary, I think.
Yeah, and I just want to end this thing by just telling you about something which is really, really interesting. And I really believe this is probably as important as anything we've ever talked about. Now, these are scientific facts. And we've said this before. Al and I don't talk about things that, yeah, we do think things are important, but we back them up with facts, okay? This is something called DNA experiments. And this is really interesting. There were 3 experiments made, but basically they proved just one thing, which I want to talk about. It shows that DNA can actually heal itself according to the feelings of the individual. This was reported by a scientific test done by a gentleman by the name of Greg Braden in his recent program, where he entitled it Healing Hearts and Healing Nations, the Science of Peace and the Power of Prayer. And spiritual traditions, when the library at Alexandria burned down, we lost 532,000 documents. And it's even from that time, it proved that people that felt well and decided to be positive became, they survived the problems they had at that time. So
Wow.
You have the DNA within yourself to alter it to be positive. That's what these experiments proved. And I think that's something that we have to really understand. You have in your mind a piece of soil, and that soil will give you back whatever you plant in it, which is basically part of the strangest secret which this show is based on. If you plant negative thoughts, it will give you back negative results. And if you plant positive thoughts, it will give you back positive results. And it's just that simple. It's just that simple.
It's so simple that we cannot even fathom it sometimes because we love to complicate things.
Yeah. Misery loves company.
That's right. So, friends, when you go out this spring and see those dandelions, I want you to take a moment before you rush over to the hardware store for the Roundup. And that was a free plug for Roundup, by the way. We're not getting paid for that. But I want you to think about that dandelion and take a moment and go look at it and maybe pick one. And just remember the lessons, that the dandelion teaches us: to be yourself, persevere, bloom where you're planted, and never forget when that dandelion dries up and those little seeds are there, you pull it up and you make a wish, and that's about dreaming. So that's another benefit of the dandelion. So
yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah.
Norb, thank you so much as always.
Thank you. God bless. Okay.
And friends, we hope you enjoyed our show. And until next time, this is Al Edwards for Norb Svanascini, and we will see you again real soon. Thank you.